Hello, everyone. SaaS webinar, People Analytics, Taking Employee Engagement from Good to Great. I'm Brendan Bailey from SaaS, your host for today. Now let's meet today's presenters. Sheldon is a solutions architect at SaaS. Blake's career in human resources began as an HR strategy consultant. Later, he worked with the SaaS HR department, learning applied workforce analytics. Receiving his MBA with a focus on decision analytics, he now consults with HR departments, helping them transform their role in the organization to become a strategic analytics partner. Join Sarah Harden, a senior engineer at SaaS, a systems engineer at SaaS. Sarah has worked in quantitative analytics for 5 years, and her background is in applied sciences and modeling. Before that, she worked in Deloitte's workforce analytics practice, where she helped clients to build and implement quantitative solutions regarding best practices for their workforce. Blake, Sarah, thanks for joining us today. Blake, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Let me make sure I can get my screen shared here for everybody. Well, thank everyone for joining today. We're going to be talking about people analytics and employee engagement. And I wanted to start out with this quote here by SaaS's CEO, actually, my CEO, where he said, 95% of my assets drive out the front gate every evening. It's my job to bring them back. And see, that's a big part of it, but HR has a big part of helping him in that mission, right? So let's talk about employee engagement and HR, people analytics, how we help in this space. Starting out, just discuss a little bit about why now. Why are analytics in HR becoming a big hot topic and hot trend for 2017? And third, this business perspective of people are expensive. I'm sure as HR professionals you know this, but organizations, businesses want to know if I'm spending 50 to 60% of my operational budget on my employees, and getting the best return on my investment. And as we're moving into more of a data economy, they want to see how analytics can help ensure that they're getting that return. Perspective, they want to have an empowered, loyal, productive team. This is probably a pitch for managers for a long time. However, it now has data. The tools exist to be able to empower managers and help them ensure that they have that empowered, loyal, and productive team. And all these elements can be measured, and SaaS can help with that picture. The industry perspective. This was an excellent TED Talk by Rainer Strack from the Boston Consulting Group, who discusses the workforce crisis of 2030. And there are three key parts to this. One is the global labor shortage, which we know how many people are going to be in the workforce by 2030. They've already been born. We know that if we took that population versus the number of jobs that exist today, that would be more jobs than there are people to fill them. So that, looking at it from a pure numbers perspective, if you look at it from a fit perspective, if we had all of those people in jobs in 2030, there's a tremendous skills mismatch. And I often hear that technology is going to be replacing jobs. But what's actually happening is technology is making more jobs more complex. Roles in HR, where we're having to involve more and more analytics into everyday operations, well, that's happening across the board. So there's this skills mismatch piece to it as well, of technology influencing our jobs faster and increasing the requirements. And then the role challenge. So if I have data statistics today, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, says that they have 3.5 jobs at the time of graduation. They have 3.5 offers from companies. So how is someone going to differentiate which company they're going to go work for? That's where culture comes in that's where, as a job seeker, they're going to be looking at and evaluating your organization for things that maybe were not as important when it was more in an employer orientation versus a job seeker orientation. There are trends that are going on in the HR space. I'm not going to talk in all of these in detail. Some of them look familiar to all, and I'm sure I have not captured all of them, but these are all challenges and trends that are going on in HR today that now we can use what's in the bottom right there. We can use analytics to help figure out the best way to optimize your candidate and employee experience, or how to do management with more efficiently with the increased regulation and GDPR. Or benefit claims analysis with rising healthcare costs. All of these different trends, organizations are looking at how can we apply better practices in data and analytics to make sure that they're picking our company have multiple offers. And this job seeker orientation, there's this people perspective of what have you done for me lately. And you can go to Glassdoor, you can go to numerous sites where there's a lot more available information on an organization where HR is being challenged by that as well. So the complexity is increasing. Now, we've done these webinars before in June. It was from good to great. And we were discussing best candidate analysis. We looked at 4 different models that whether somebody would be a good candidate for our organization. We were trying to predict whether they would fit well within a particular organization, whether they fit the job well, what propensity is that they'll make, that we would make an offer to them, and the propensity that they would accept that offer. And this would facilitate a macro level of HR of increasing employee time value. So for a certain amount of time, we know that as we attract and hire them, it costs our organization money, and it takes time to get them onboarded. This is the time to fill an onboarding exercise. And best candidate analysis was trying to address that perspective. How can we get better candidates, better quality of hires that spending less time finding them, and it's taking less time to onboard them. The webinar is out there today. Today we're talking about how can we grow and engage our population in a way that will also increase the value we bring to our organization. The next time we'll talk about modeling around retention. This curve is what we're concerned with, and how do we influence the value that an employee brings the fastest way possible. And this is where we're trying to apply people analytics and data science to get our answer. Just to set a baseline for everybody on how SAS works to solve your problems, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Begin with unifying your data. It says that the average HR organization has 10 different applications to do their operations. If you're one of those, if you're a vendor, one of those 10 vendors, you're trying to build out the capabilities of the other 9 and be the super HR platform. SAS is not entirely concerned. It's also in it to try and buy and rip and replace all of these different applications, especially if they're working well for you. But you still have the needs of answering your analytical questions. And accessing that data is a challenge. Well, that's where it's able to use its data quality and data integration tools to say, let's just build access engines to each one of your application systems, and changes, SAS can connect to the next one as well. But the main goal here is, let's, for the purpose of analytics, just use the data that's there and set the access engines to do that and unify that data in a way that can be prepared for analytics. It can be done with role-based security, so nobody is seeing system information from a system that they shouldn't, and it creates this single version of truth. So calculating turnover, you don't have 10 different formats for calculating turnover. all of that data together for analytics, you get to do the fun part of asking and then analyzing your data. So this is how SAS works. Soak up the data, analyze data, well, cleanse it, and then analyze that data. Typically, things on the left are handled by HRIS and IT, while you can upload your own tables, etc., to the SAS tools if you wanted. And then are your analysts, business partners, and managers who get to use wizard-driven, easy-to-use interfaces, and that piece really helps open up the access to HR's data and what analysts are trying to bring forward for the organization to take action. A bit about enterprise platform, and Sarah and I have met with customers. We hear a lot from HR of, well, we don't have the data, or we don't have enough data, or our data isn't clean. And these are challenges for HR. However, this isn't the first exercise where data science runs into challenges with data. Today, scientists spend 80% of their time doing data cleansing. But the purpose of analytics is to be able to handle all of these different systems and create that single truth. And on the not having enough data, when we talk with customers, we start to talk about how the different types of data that exist that are maybe not typical HR data sources, but they certainly serve a purpose for understanding employees and their behavior. So you have your productivity platforms like your application tracking system, which is an HR tool, but you'd also have like calendar behavior out of Google or Microsoft Office. Perhaps that's data that could be used. You also have resumes and surveys that can be leveraged as data as well. And all of that text information and job descriptions, that could be a way of creating data. It's data that exists, it just has not been transformed in a way for the purpose of analytics. Or operational platforms. So HR has a HRIS system or a system of record, has payroll systems to handle operations, but there's also information around sales and finance data, perhaps supply chain data. When you start to add all of these data sources together, you actually can have a very rich data for this of people analytics. And this, having the analytics platform helps. Having a way to connect and build access to each of these different systems to help understand what's happening, create a single view of our population, and develop insights to us moving forward. So engagement surveys specifically, I use data science. Now, Sarah and I have both done employee engagement surveys in our lives as consultants, and some of the typical challenges we see are disparate questions. I had a customer show me that they had 800 pages, 800 PDFs of different cuts of data and fidelity on their 100 or so different questions. A lot to comprehend and understand in there. I'm not sure how much value they received out of that, but when we can look at questions and the patterns of responses to create a more holistic analysis, that's where science can really help. Text. So when you've had employees respond to questions and they write you these blocks of text, the ways that I've seen customers do it is building out an Excel table with the comment and different categories and trying to identify some trends and themes. Well, you could quantify that unstructured text, and this was a very exciting thing, or perhaps a frustrating thing, when Sarah and I both got to use some of SAS's tools doing text analytics and realizing all the time that we had spent doing that, reading, categorizing of text information. SAS could do that in a snap of a finger, so that was exciting as well. Also, when looking at an engagement survey, it's very reactive, trying to understand what's been going on in the organization versus when you do some predictive analytics, being more proactive about your population. If you know the drivers for particular types of employees, then you can be proactive about ways to keep them engaged. And lastly, the fuzzy site. So sometimes you get favorable, and you know, if it's a question around whether my best effort all the time, well, most people are going to be answering pretty favorable about that. But there needs to be a way to understand if I'm answering that way on one question, how I respond to all the other questions could have a very different perspective, and look at that in today's presentation to get some tangible results of how you can actually tease that out. So the process through today is first capturing the data. We have an Excel file that's just 58 questions. It's got response rows for employees who've responded to the survey, and we're going to mine that data to determine engagement profile. Explore that data. We're going to understand more about the disengaged profile within our organization. We're going to analyze that population and identify specific drivers of the disengaged population, and a dashboard that's going to be pushed to our managers to help them in making decisions about how to keep their employees engaged. I want to walk through some of the methodology for creating engagement profiles. I understand that third-party vendors sometimes provide an engagement profile, sometimes they don't. For this, we wanted to use a methodology that's common for creating an engagement profile, so you would have access to this if you were to do it. So first is determining the engagement criteria. And in the data set, we had questions, one that's discussing their individual level of effort, and then those around them and their level of effort. And then questions around expectations, their individual expectations and whether they understand them, and then their peers. Those 4 questions to create engagement profiles. So this is using cluster methodology to identify specific responses across these questions. There are 4 distinct groups. You see on the left there, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Look at one of those profiles. For this, we took one group that's here, group 0. They say they have high individual effort. They believe people around them have a low level of effort, and they don't have a good understanding of their expectations, and they don't believe those around them have a good understanding of their expectations either. So if you clicked on any one of these other groups, they would have a different story with them. This particular group is exhibiting these behaviors. And that's how we're going to create these engagement profiles. And what next is how SAS analyzes these profiles to determine the drivers of engagement. So for this particular group here, group, and then finding a way to make an impactful dashboard and guide conversations to improve employee engagement. So I will pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks. So everyone for joining today. So I'm Sarah Harden, and what we're going to do now is walk through the actual analytical process. So Blake's been talking to you about background, he's been talking to you about context. So really what we want to do in our purpose behind building this particular project was, back when we reached our consultants, one of the main things we had to do was figure out how to get value and how to gain insight out of employee engagement surveys. And that can be, like, for all the reasons Blake was saying, incredibly challenging. So when we moving forward with this project, that was really what we wanted to focus on, was how do we, we've talked about machine learning, SAS does analytics, how can we apply this to an HR-specific realm of engagement surveys? So basically, like Blake said, we've got, our data set, which would be the typical Excel sheet that you would get back from surveys. So each observation, each row is an individual, it's an observation with, of course, their answers to the question. Now, pretty much survey is going to follow the best places to work, which is what a lot of organizations use. Of course, you can pick and choose some demographic information to include, which is what we've done. So we were asking people, age group, a little bit about where they are in the organization, and I'll show you how we're going to use that to apply the insight that we're going to glean from the Best Places to Work survey and the SAS survey, annual survey, to our employees that are in the organization. So we want to make sure we keep that balance of privacy because we know that's a big deal. Obviously, we want to encourage people to take the survey, and they're more likely to do that if we protect their information. But we still, as an HR organization or as an HR team, want to be push out insightful information to management so they can further engage, right, and improve the employee and the employee, really what the employee experience is working for us. So what you're doing right now is really what I would use as an HR analyst to work through this project, to work through analyzing engagement survey, mining the data, getting insight, and then pushing out into a dashboard. So what Blake do first is a machine learning technique that we call clustering. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. So this is the interface that an analyst would use. On the left-hand side, you're going to see all of these different pieces of data, right? So if I scroll down a little quicker, these are our questions. Now, it's going to end up being the demographic information that we talked about, we were including, and then, of course, we've got all of our questions. So what we've done on the right-hand side is we've actually dragged and dropped questions. So I can show you how this would work. So just from Blake and I's experience, we knew these 4 questions, like I give my best effort, et cetera, the questions that he went over a little earlier, that these high predictors of someone's basically over satisfaction at our organization. So I can click and drag this question over to the right-hand side. And what SAS is going to do, it's going to say it's already assigned because I've already built the visualization. But what SAS is going to do is, again, find those groups that answer these questions the same way. So what it's doing is taking the population as a whole, and clustering actually allows me to cluster groups of people who answer the questions the same way. And this is going to come out with something that's very intuitive to an HR analyst. I'm going to maximize this so you get a better view. So there's 4 groups here. There's this particular group that's like they give their best effort. The people in them give their best effort. They understand how to do their job, and they understand that the people at our organization also do a good job. So in this case, our survey questions go from 1 as best, right, strongly agree, to 5, which is strongly disagree. So if you have a lot of strong 1s, it means someone really agrees. This we would most likely call engaged employee. This is someone who feels like they understand what's going on, that their team understands what's going on, and that ABC org is working towards that cohesive mission. All right, this group of people, they're answering a little all over the board, right? So they believe they give their best effort. The people in them, they're not quite sure. They understand how to do their job. And then it looks like maybe they're not quite sure if everyone else understands how to do their job. This is what we call a renegade. Okay, so this is someone who feels like they're doing their thing, but that may be off the beaten path of what the rest of the organization is doing. All right, profile. This is the one that Blake was showing you. This is someone who feels like, they very strongly agree that they're giving their best effort, and everything else is much more dispersed on that scale of 1 to 5. This is going to be someone who is disengaged, right? Their chances of attriting, of leaving the organization are high. These are individuals that we want to make sure we can engage with and bring back into the fold, all right? So each different profile that we're looking at is going to have a different way of handling that organization. And individuals are people who are saying, we're out, all right? We're leaving ABC org. We're incredibly unhappy. So these are the types of profiles that you can see and how people are engaging with the organization. So now we understand these profiles. What we want to do is use this information to figure out what the demographics of those profiles are. So we've found these subgroups within our populations based on how they answered groups of questions that we HR analysts know are relevant. Does that enjoy their job? Do they enjoy their team? Do they feel like it's working? So once we've assigned, and simply to assign it, I'll bring this up really quick so I can show, all you have to do is say derive a cluster ID variable. And all that does is any person who answered the questions in the way that means they belong to cluster 3 just gets a number 3 by their observation, right? So that row in the Excel sheet, if this was back in Excel, would just get a 3 marked next to it. That's how we score the individual. So once we added those numbers to our data set, this is what's called mining, right? We're taking what's there, we're gathering new insight, new information, and we're adding it back into our data set. We can actually use a different machine learning technique called decision tree. And a decision tree is really powerful in that it helps show us where are certain breaks in behavior. So map, it's a map of behavior. We're mapping the different behavior and demographics of our population that exists in the survey. So again, this is going to be using the demographic information like age range, where are they to a certain aggregated level in the employee population, et cetera. So you can see here that I've gone ahead and grabbed some predictors from this left-hand side that we did in our demographic information of the survey, and I've included them in my decision tree. So I've group, job category, gender, career level, and family status. These are all demographic things that we chose to include in our survey. Again, you could have different ones, but the idea is to figure out where these different populations that we're looking at, these engagement profiles, what are the demographics that belong there? Now you're here that my response variable is my profile. I could change this, but right now, as Blake said earlier, what we're shooting for is exploring that disengaged profile, because that's the person I really want to engage with, that I want to bring back into the fold, right, that I want to have those meaningful conversations with. So I need to know not only who belongs in that population because they answered the survey questions a certain way, but then once I'm in that population, what are the demographics? Are they all females? Are they all millennials? What exactly makes up that population? That's what we'll use the decision tree for. So you're going to disengaged is blue. And what the decision tree is, it's going to try to group these demographic variables into the most pure blue, which means it's just trying to get everyone who's disengaged, everyone who's blue into a single space. And you're going to see that it does that by looking at behavior, right? So here we're seeing that there's certain age groups, 30 to 39 or 70 and older. They have certain career levels, and there's family status, and there's disengaged, engaged, enthusiast. I have 9 individuals that are 30, 39, or 70 or older, and in these specific career levels that are engaged. Now, the important part of this is that I use this to say, okay, if that's what that particular population looks like in my survey, I can actually apply that information to any employee information I have in my HRIS system, because this is the stuff that we have in our HRIS system. I know how old people are. I know what part of the organization they're in. I most likely know their family status, and I know what career level they're at. So when I've mined this information, I can actually predict which subgroup people are in. Are they disengaged, engaged, or otherwise? And then I use my decision tree to score that. So it's actually merging the 2 pieces of data together. So I've got my engagement profile from my cluster analysis, and using my decision tree to tell me what demographics make up that particular profile, and I'm adding it back into all of my employee data. Again, so we're not messing with anonymity. Everyone is still anonymous when they take their survey. We're just using data mining techniques to give us insight into who in our employee population could be a part of one of these profiles. You can see too is there's 7 engaged and 1 enthusiast also that exists within what we call a node or a leaf here in our decision tree. In this case, I, an HR analyst, would probably push out those 8 individuals that are engaged and enthusiasts, so we could figure out, are they almost disengaged? Because they're all in the same block, so they all share the same characteristics. Maybe these other 8 people go on a watch list, or maybe I just email their manager and say, hey, these other 8 people may soon belong to that disengaged profile. So let's make sure we're keeping tabs on them. Or maybe these are the 8 people you send that next pulse survey to. That's an example how you can use the decision tree, and again, mine that data and add it back into what we already have in our HRIS system. Now we built our profile, we figured out the demographics that make up that profile, and let's figure out what drives that profile, because we want to have tangible results. So we figure out, what do these people care about? What is driving these different profiles? So you're going to hear this is a logistic regression, and the only difference between a logistic regression and a linear regression, right? Linear regression, if you want to tell how many or how much. Logistic regression, if you want to tell if something is basically binomial or true or false. And all that means is I want to know, is someone predicted to be disengaged, right? True or false? If true, tell me what's driving that. Here, I've got a couple of different effects, and these are basically grouping of questions in our survey. So any question that had to do with a career, we grouped it together, and we gave average score. Any question that had to do with benefits, management, compensation, same deal. We just grouped it together and got an average score. I also to see if career level, did someone who was a manager feel different than someone who was an associate data scientist? How does that impact a score? And then wanted to group by age. I thought maybe, again, someone who was 70 or older, as we saw in that decision tree, may be very different than someone who was, 25 and new to our organization. Here, the main thing I want you to focus on is this variable importance. And this is what's telling you within age group what's important to these individuals. So I can already tell just from using this logistic regression that when it comes to if someone is disengaged, career, how they feel about how their career is going is incredibly important to an individual who's 40-49 or 30-39. And look at maybe how someone feels about their management. You're going to fit a lot of these groups, right? Feel like management is important. So 50-59 all the way, looks like our entire workforce except for millennials. Now this is something that I enjoy about visual analytics, is that number one, it helps me do data management. Is something going on here? Is there a reason that these individuals don't seem to be shifting as I go through these different pieces of variable importance? There could be. Honestly, it looks like I just didn't have a lot of millennials engage with my survey. So I can go back to my manager and say, hey, we only had, 4 individuals and they're all over the board. What does that mean? It means that we need to either figure out a way to engage millennials with our surveys in a different way, or we've gotten to a point where our millennials are dispersed across our employees. They all feel differently. So that's an important piece of insight as well. Don't really have a strong engagement or disengagement among our millennials. Part also be, too, that these individuals have just been in the workforce longer, so they have stronger opinions and principles of what they care about in their careers. So last, just to give you another example, I'll go to compensation. You're going to see that this changes once more. It looks like compensation is incredibly important to the 40-49 age range. Now, again, it's not saying that there's a significant difference in career level. So, I would assume that most of these are my directors, my upper management, et cetera. But what this model is telling me is that it doesn't matter. From vice president to a principal data scientist to maybe someone who's 40-49 and just switched careers. None of that seems to matter in ABC organization, right? But compensation, management, and career matter equally across the board to people in the age range. Now that I would use, that's how I would use a logistic regression to help me figure out, based on, the disengaged profile, what do these people care about? Partially so that I can start to drive those conversations. That's kind of insight that I can give my managers and say, hey, if you got someone on your team and we've predicted based on our decision tree and based on our cluster analysis that they are disengaged, then these are the 3 top things you can have that conversation about. Let's talk about compensation, let's talk about management style, and let's talk about their career. Where do they see their career going. Now, to the cluster analysis, I can actually derive a predicted value. So this is going to say, what's the chance that someone is going to be considered disengaged? Okay, so in the cluster analysis, we actually built the profile based on those 4 questions. And then using the logistic regression, we can actually predict for everyone else in our organization, right, based on the profile and based on the demographics, we can predict the chances that they also fall into that. So what would the results look like? You know, Blake and I keep wanting to, we want to bring this back to tangible things. What would the results look like? This is an example of how I would use this. I've got age group, I've got my engagement survey ID number, so this is just that row in the Excel sheet, and then some more demographic information, right? The country they're from, this could easily be job level, status, or anything that you ask from a demographic standpoint. This ID variable, that just goes back to this decision tree, right? So that's how I'm understanding the character makeup that I'm assuming, right, that I'm predicting the individuals have. So I'm predicting 383, which is a survey response, is of the leaf ID variable 13. That's because demographic information they filled out on the survey, and it's based on my machine learning and my data mining techniques. This person has 0 internal promotions, and they are predicted to be a 1. That is a 100%. It means that our model is saying this person is absolutely disengaged. Now, but obviously, how am I supposed to get this back? How do I get this to a manager? I've now got all these predicted variables. I understand, okay, this person's probably disengaged. This person maybe not so much. You know, I've got some of this information. How do I actually pass it along to a manager so that they can find insight out of it? So right now, what we've done is we've mined the data. We've explored the data, we've analyzed the data enough to get some of these leaf ID variables and these probabilities. Now we have to share the data in such a way that's important. So if I go to my report, basically what I'm doing is taking all of the insight that I've just gleaned, and I'll go ahead and, I think this is good. So what we've got here is now as an analyst, I'm taking that insight and I'm passing it along in a report. And I want to build a strong report that has safety rails on it, right? So I want to enable my audience to explore what I've just found out about my 40 to 49-year-old employees, about my millennials, about, you know, the decision trees and the behavior. But I want them to do it in such a way that I know they'll gain the insight that is useful instead of gaining and making assumptions that are maybe unhealthy or unhelpful for employees. So how is I've got all of these different options on the left-hand side to build out a report. Everything from word clouds and containers and controls all the way up through all of these different graphics, right? So it's very easy to drag, and basically it's the same exact type of characteristics. You just drag and drop as our previous interface showing you. So what I want here is this is just an overview. I've got job category up here. This I would send out to managers so that they can actually go down and say, okay, I'm a manager in sales, so that's the person I'll take on right now. I'm a manager in sales, and I want to know exactly how my team most likely answered their survey based on their demographic information and where they are in the organization. Sometimes sales, you're going to see that it's going to filter through here. Most of my sales organization, most of my team is going to be in Wisconsin. You see that this highlighted red, and it says that their retention rate is pretty low. So we have high attrition in sales in our organization. That's something as a manager I want to be aware of, to constantly be checking in with my employees. Then I frequency of disengaged, engaged, renegade, enthusiast. Again, those profiles we built in the cluster analysis. And last but not least, I can go down here on the right-hand side and see questions that my HR analyst said were important. And we'll cover this in a minute, but these are ones that our analyst said was important. So I can go, okay, with my disengaged employees, I can drill down and I can see in consulting, finances, human services, and I'm going to go all the way down to sales. And in sales, I have engagement survey ID, that same information we just saw on the other table. And it's going to show me basically the answers that individuals have. So if red it means that that's not good, right? So I can see that pay decisions are related to performance. People don't like that, right? We talked about compensation being a big driver of these disengagement profiles. It's just a way to kind of organize it so I can give my managers quick insight. They can, you can color code, again, you can customize, you can do all kinds of things to make sure that they're gaining insight and, again, getting tangible ideas for what to have these conversations about. Actually make it helpful for a manager in particular. Well, that was something that we really wanted to focus on. And so basically, if I want to go to Wisconsin and I want to add a link and I want to say, okay, I want to add a section link. Now I built one in here. So if my manager comes in and clicks on Wisconsin, my sales manager, it's actually take them to their team. And so this is what I built out. And this is actually your brilliant webinar team right here. And again, as we talked about, taking all of that insight that we mined and reapplying it based on the demographic and the predictive profile information, reapplying it to our workforce. So that's all I've done here. I basically said, okay, based on that information, tell me their predicted profile. So, so we've got Braden over here who's disengaged, Blake who's disengaged. I'm considered an enthusiast, and Courtney over there is the renegade. Now, on the bottom is what I think is really helpful. It's done, again, that logistic regression that told us what matters to each of these different, not only engagement profiles, but demographics. Because, Brendan, who is an older man, is going to have a different set of priorities than I will as a young millennial. So let's talk. So he cares about management and benefits. I care about career and work content. So if Brendan or Blake is disengaged, then with Blake, you're going to want to engage with him differently than Brendan. And Blake cares about rewards and compensation. So basically, Blake wants to get compensated well. He cares about the money. Whereas, Brendan wants to go, okay, well, what is my management like, and what do I get for benefits, right? Maybe he's getting to that age where that's something that he's concerned about, is benefit enrollment and what kind of benefits are offered to him for the company. But these are just ideas of how to guide management to, number one, say, okay, this person most likely is disengaged. You need to reach out to them. You need to have touch points with them. Not only that, but here's how you can guide the conversation. Usually this demographic group cares about compensation. Usually they care about career. It helps guide that conversation so their manager not only has a good idea of the team dynamic, but also, again, how to engage with them in a way that's effective and proactive instead of reactive, right? So we cut down on the exit surveys because we've increased our ability to gain insight from our pulse and our annual surveys. So hopefully we reduce attrition, people leaving our organization. Now really quick, since I kind of showed you the end result here, I do go over one extra thing to bring up. These are two pieces of functionality that I think are really a time saver for HR analysts and really important. One is going to be text analysis. Now, SAS has the ability to integrate with unstructured, structured, and semi-structured pieces of information. So what you see here is we all know, what it's like to have 8,000 free-form comment boxes, and that can be a lot to handle. And then, you have 10 people, and they're all doing, they're all going to, fit these different comments into buckets, and then you're having to have people check it, and it takes two months. Blake and I have been there, done that. What SAS does is it takes this unstructured text, and using the click of a button, literally, you've got a column that's unstructured text, and what we do is we just say, hey, this is a document collection. This is unstructured text. And I go here and I drag and drop it to categories, and SAS is going to read through every piece of that information and apply not only sentiment, so is it positive, negative, or neither, but it's going to figure out how much does that word show up? Is it good, bad, negative, or other? And if you click on a term, so management or manager, you're going to see down here this is going to start to populate. So, just let's test it. So managers need some help. Please, someone train the managers. This is a 50, it's sitting right at neutral. it's a little bit negative, but it's not someone saying, hey, I'm leaving because my managers are terrible. This type of sentiment is something that, again, we can add back into our data set. So it's a new column that says sentiment is 0.5, which I know means neutral. If it's 0.8, it means it's a really positive comment about our managers. And this is a way to bring in that text data and make it useful and quantify it, which is something I think that would be really helpful in adding information and color and deep content to our survey analysis. And at least using these data mining techniques, you know, the answer could be, okay, well, what's next? This annual survey only happens once a year. We need more effective pulse surveys, or we need to figure out how we're going to make our surveys more effective in the first place. Well, there's a way to do that. If you use a tree technique that we talked about a little earlier, you're going to see that you can actually look at the pulse survey, and the decision tree can tell you certain questions that are strong predictors, right, of the engagement profile. So here you're going to see I've done the same thing. I've dragged and dropped my engagement profile over to response, then I've dragged and dropped every question that we asked on our survey over into the predictors. SAS uses smart technology on the back end to tell you which of these questions are strong predictors of this engagement profile. So if I've selected, we'll select disengaged, and I'll let you guys, I'll let it update. And what'll happen is as this updates, you're going to see that that as the questions change, let's try engaged. Okay. So it looks like the population's pretty steady, which is good. So you're going to see that these predictors these are strong. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions here. SAS is saying, hey, no matter if someone is engaged, disengaged, enthusiast, or renegade, these 7 questions are the top questions in getting individuals in determining whether or not someone is engaged, disengaged, whatever, any of those. So what you can see is that these are the top questions I would include in my pulse survey. I don't need to pulse survey 15 questions. I can pulse survey these 7, and with a 95% confidence interval, tell you what all people belong in, whether it's disengaged, engaged, renegade, or enthusiast. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Brendan. Hi, Blake.
Awesome. All right. Get my screen. And slightly off script, but I just wanted to show the data set that we used to generate that. And it's pretty standard Excel spreadsheet here where we just have respond to all of our questions. But we're able to take this same data set and do all of what Sarah had just mentioned. So now, the notice, just wanting to know the back of the napkin is the view there. And I know we're somewhat short on time, so this starts out with trying to figure out the unproductive time per day. And this source was from Fortune and Robert Half time study done this year. And I can see how Amazon became such a great company, but 42 minutes people are spending doing personal activities. They chiefly noted shopping, which is why I talk about Amazon. But they've got a lot of time spent doing personal activities, 56 minutes spent on their phone. So maybe, myself as a millennial, I guess I can spend more time on my phone because I, of course, never use it. That approximates to about 20% per week. So, of course, I would anticipate you to say that just because I'm spending this time, it doesn't mean that I'm not engaged. And so I wanted to curb that a bit by saying those of us that are in this 32% that are engaged, according to Gallup, we use every single minute. 60% of our organization is considered engaged. Or, in other words, we'll just say that 68% of the population, they're the ones who are under 96 minutes of the day. If we assumption and then pretend that we're $1 million revenue company per year and that every single employee in our organization, regardless of how many employees have has an equal attribution and revenue per employee. We know that 68% of that population is disengaged, and 20% of their time is unproductive. But if 10 minutes per day more productive for the disengaged, that equals to about $17,000 annually. Not a lot, but when you scale it out to how much revenue your organization might be making, so $1 million is $16,889. Scale up, certainly the potential revenue gains from productivity. If we can just move people to be 10 minutes more productive per day, maybe we need to take away their phone. But yeah, that would move the needle pretty significantly. Open it up for questions, but anybody on the call, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We also have other assets out there around this topic of people analytics.
All right, so much. We do have a few minutes for questions. The first question is, we have engagement profiles provided by our vendor. How would this be any different?
A good question. I think, and something that I would to that vendor is how they develop their engagement profiles, because actually going through this exercise, you might somewhat reverse engineer the profile that they're coming up with. But if you feel comfortable with their engagement profile and how they're making their assessment of your population, you could certainly just use their profile as the target and draw the questions over as predictors and do the same exercise. You would just change the, instead of creating your own engagement profiles, you could use the one provided by the vendor. But I also just make sure that if you do it for your own organization, there isn't any neutrality or duplication. We're basically predicting the same questions that they use to determine engagement.
All right. Does the analysis require a very technical person to do it?
So the answer is no, right? Basically, it's as simple as loading the spreadsheet that Blake showed in Excel and using that drag and drop interface I showed you all. So I didn't do any math. I didn't do any coding to build out that entire project. And you can see the amount of insight that we got just in, the 25 minutes that we were talking about it. So, exploring, honestly, for me is the most exciting part when it comes to, finding new groups in my population using cluster analysis, things that I didn't know were there before. And I found that as a data scientist, or even just as an HR analyst, when I was able to do the type of analysis, which, SAS's top of training didn't take me that long to learn, really increased my value proposition, not only as an employee, but also to the organization.
Okay. SaaS solution or product that you were using?
Here is specifically called Visual Analytics and Visual Statistics, and comes with the report that you saw where I was building the report viewer that will allow managers to log in at any point in time and see what I've built, and then it also includes the exploration and all that machine learning techniques that you saw.
Okay. Our last question is for Blake. Have you had any revealing experiences with customers around this work?
Yeah. So there was actually a customer that I had worked with who had their survey. They provided enough of PDF profiles, and then their question to us was, could you take this information and there is a population in our company that we believe exists that our vendor was not able to find. They didn't know, but they wanted to challenge us. And so we took their data. We were able to put it through our process. And what we had discovered is that there is a specific population that is existing there who answered basically on their benefits package. But you would know that this specific set of people was there purely for the benefits. and able to map that back to their HRIS system, they identified that those people, they changed their benefits plan, and those people no longer are in the organization. So it's a retroactive analysis, but was pretty informative.
This is Sarah. I just want to make one more point really quick about the tools.
Sure.
I was thinking about this afterwards. I want to point out that Blake and I wanted to make sure that we use something that could integrate seamlessly with Microsoft Excel. So everything that you saw today can be surfaced in Excel spreadsheets, in tabs, where individuals can work on it in Excel. Because our idea is to meet the customer, meet the HR team where they're at. We know that a lot of people are really comfortable and familiar with Excel. So everything that I did today, you can surface in an Excel tab or workbook and work from there as well.
So would something like the analysis that you showed take to be done by one analyst?
I would say I built this in 2 or 3.
Okay, all right.
And that goes, data management, et cetera, all the way through the exploration and the final analysis that I wanted to push out to the audience.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, I'm afraid that is all the time we have for questions today. Blake and Sarah, thank you so much for your presentation, your demo, and for answering our questions. Before, I want to invite everyone to connect with SAS on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Join and participate in the ever-growing SAS communities, which now has more than 120,000 members. SAS Global Forum 2018 is coming up in the spring, April 8th through the 11th, at the Colorado Convention Center in Denver. Take advantage of dozens of workshops, presentations, demos, networking opportunities that will broaden your skills and sharpen your focus. You can take advantage of the early bird discount registration, which runs through March 5th. To get all the information and to register, go to sasglobalforum.com. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We know that your time is valuable, and we hope that you found today's presentation both engaging and informative. For Blake, Sheldon, Sarah Harden, and SAS, I'm Brendan Bailey. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.